Hi, it's Bobby from Bobby's Baking Blog, and this is a full-blown gum paste rose. I'm not finished with it yet. I'm going to take it to a fully blown rose with wired petals that will be going around it. But this is what I thought would be fun to show you how to make, since I'm making this for a client's wedding who's getting married during Halloween. It's a red, deep red rose with smoked edges, and I had seen this rose actually at a restaurant that I favor and just thought it was exquisite. So I'm going to show you how to make this rose from the bud stage all the way out to the fully petal stage. Okay, I've shown you what the rose is going to look like, and now I'm going to show you how we're going to start. There are two ways that you can do this rose as far as what you're going to use. You can either, which is the first way I'm going to show you, is a styrene bud, and you wrap the rose petals around it, or you can start with a bud that you make with gum paste on your own. Either way works fine. If you're going to do the gum paste one, you need to let these dry overnight, even 2 days if possible, because you want your rose to be secured on their bud. But I'm going to show you the styrene bud first. So the first thing we're going to do is start with a petal, and I am working with the Orchard petal cutters, and I have started with an R3, which looks like this. I took my gum paste on a pasta machine to an 8, so it's fairly thin. I'm just going to soften these edges just a little bit, and then we're going to go ahead and vine it. And you want to make sure your rose is centered with the little knot at the top. I will tell you right off the bat that red is messy, and if you choose to wear gloves, that's fine. I cannot wear gloves. I feel like I'm going to drop my rose. It makes me nervous. So I'm going to take it out. I'm going to put it on the pad on the less vine side. I'm going to soften this just a little bit on the top because we want our rose to look tight, and you don't want any frills at the beginning of your bud. Roses don't start to frill till they go out. I'm going to flip my rose over onto a softer pad. So now the heavy vein side is up, and I'm going to gently just cup it in the center. And this pad came with this cool little foam thing, which makes it easy for me to add the egg white. So I'm going to brush the egg white about halfway up my petal so that it fits on my bud. If you keep your brush in a damp paper towel, it will keep the egg white from shellacking onto your brush. I'm not going to worry, and neither will you, about if the bud is going to show on the bottom, because that'll get covered later. So I'm going to take this up as high as I can, and I'm going to wrap it around really tight so that I get that beautiful spiral that you saw in my full-blown rose. I don't like to add any egg white to close this if I possibly can. I also you don't want to see your styrene inside. So you want to roll it nice and gently and close it. And try not to have to add any egg white because that will keep you from being able to color it. And that looks nice and tight. So now we're going to add on 2 more petals. And we're going to do the same thing. We're going to lightly just soften this up before we vine it, just to get rid of if I accidentally have some ragged edges that I didn't see. We're going to put it on the viner, making sure that my V is pointed down in the center there, because it's so tiny compared to this big viner. And right now I'm working with a Squire's viner, which we will be carrying Squire products in shortly. I've been asked several times what kind of binder I use, and that's what I use for my roses. I'm going to gently coax it off. I'm going to turn it over so the less heavy vein side is showing. I'm going to gently just frill a smidge of this, and I'm using a ball tool, and I like using metal. If you have plastic and you enjoy it, don't switch. That's what you're used to. We're going to flip it back over, put it into the center of my pad, gently just cup it up a little bit. You don't want it to frill up on you. Slide your little foam on there. You want to brush your egg white about halfway up. And we're going to add it to the opposite side here of where we put the first petal, or the center. So I'm going to put this on, making sure that it might just be a little bit higher. Close it gently. And I'm going to leave my right side open so that I can spiral my next petal. And I'll show you what I mean by that. This side I am going to close. And since you want this tight, so at this point, if you need to add in a little bit more egg wash, or egg white wash, excuse me, that's fine, because you're not going to be coloring right there on the inside. And we're going to wrap this around and leave that slightly open. I stick my flower, my bud, into one of those green floral foams that you can get at a floral store. And we're going to do it one more time. Just soften that up. Half on the pad, half on the gum paste. I didn't tell you that before. We're going to transfer our little petal to the binder. Gently bind our petal. As you can see, my hands and nails are all red. That's fine. I didn't want to wear gloves. It will come off probably in a couple of days. I'd much rather have my hands full of red than break my flower. Alright, half on the petal and half on the pad. As you can see, my ball is half on the gum paste and half on my foam pad. I don't really want it to frill. I'm going to flip it over, so now the heavy vein side is showing. And I'm going to gently cut my rose. Transfer it to, these are Wilton foam pads, by the way, these little pink things. And they come with a hole already in there for other uses. They're actually quite fun to work with. Be careful not to add too much egg white. You can always go back and add more. As you remember, we left our right side open so that we could slip this petal directly inside there. Make him a little bit straighter, the same height as the other petal, and gently stretch him around, leaving his right side open so that you can spiral your petals. And at this point you want it to be as tight as possible. If you look at a rosebud, they're fairly tight. I'm going to leave that side open so we can get one more petal in there. I normally work in threes. That way my gum paste doesn't dry out. And I usually spiral 3 petals of this size 2 more times, so that you will have 6 petals total in this size before I go to my mid-length. So we're going to just transfer our little petal over. The other thing, oh, wrong way. The other thing that I do, but only with dark roses like red or copper, is I will dust in between. So when I get these three on, I will go and dust them with my mixture of two different red color dusts. You don't have to do that with the lighter ones, but with the red, I have found it's the best way to get my colors exactly how I want them. Which is why my fingers are so red at the moment. So we're just gonna, again, go halfway up the petal. And spiral him in to our open petal. You always want to work on the right side. That way you won't forget and end up with too many spirals going on. Now at this point, you can leave this as a bud and put a calyx on it, and it won't show your bottom, or you can go on and bring it to your mid-size, and then to your full, and then to your fully blown size. So that's a bud right now in itself. And I'll show you how to put them on the Gumpaste buds. It's pretty much the same thing, except you're not working with the styrene ball. And so that we're not too redundant, I'm just going to put two petals on to show you how that works, because right now I already have my spiral going inside there. And I use, to do that spiral, a Nicholas Lodge method, which you can learn on Craftsy if you want to. There is a Craftsy button on each of my posts. Oh, and I forgot to soften him. So just soften just the very top. Transfer him over. And I like to vine all of my petals. Some people don't vine these little petals. They don't find it necessary. I think it makes a big difference. And I always work with a thinness of 8 to get the most realistic rose that I can. We're going to do the same thing, bring the egg white up. And then I have a little space right here. See where he's kind of open but not really? That's where I'm going to put this petal. So it looks like he's spiraling in a little bit higher than my bud itself. And I have already pre-dusted him red. He was the color of the Gumpaste that you're looking at. And I went ahead and dusted him red. And I'll leave this side open. I will be doing this rose section, or this rose flower, in sections. So this is going to be part 1, which is just the buds and the spiraling. And then part 2 will be taking it to the half. 3 will be taking it from the half to the fully, and then the wired petals. And calyxes and coloring and all that stuff. The way to know which one is your heavily vined side, it's the one that looks heavy, and it's the one where the grooves are going inward. This is going to be your heavier side. This will be your lighter side. if you get confused. And I forgot to cup him, so let me do that real quick. I got to talking and forgot. As long as he hasn't gone on, we're good. And the same thing. The only thing you need to be aware of if you're using a gum paste bud, besides letting it dry overnight, which this has, is that if you pre-dusted it, you're going to get a little bit of red on you. And if you have to move your petals, it's going to take off the coloring, and you won't be able to get that back on. So try and really be careful of where you put those petals, making sure they're nice and straight and tight. So you want to gently stretch it around to make it as tight as you possibly can, leaving that side open. Now if I left him as a bud, a little teeny bud with a calyx, I would leave both sides a smidge open, because that's what you usually see at this point in a flower. So that's 2 ways of doing a bud to start your rose. Thank you for joining me.